Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sleep Detective podcast, where good sleep, health, and longevity are inevitable. Today, I am talking about the unique challenges of sleep for entrepreneurs and other high achievers. And this is really relevant to me since I am an entrepreneur and a high achiever myself. I haven't always been this way, actually. I moved to Jackson, Wyoming right out of college and was a ski bum waiting tables for a long time. But as I kept getting older and wanting to stay in Jackson, I also wanted to have more of a purpose. And so I started studying nutrition, I started studying about health, I started moving in that direction to get me where I am here today. And now I am very ambitious. I am definitely have become an entrepreneur. I work a lot on personal development and I have a lot of big goals that I want to achieve. And so I can see how this uniquely affects my sleep. And so that's what I want to talk about today because I work also with many of our clients are similar. They're entrepreneurs or they're some sort of high achiever. And so while we work with all kinds of people, including, stay-at-home moms and people who are retired and the whole spectrum, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things, I have seen that those of us who are striving, who have a lot of goals, who have a lot of dreams, have these unique challenges with sleep. And I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear that this has a lot to do with stress, right? There is a lot on our shoulders when we are, pushing so much and striving and wanting to achieve. And it can actually lead to a lot of excitement about work. If you're like I am, there are times when I have a day where I have these amazing realizations and I'm working on my plans and my goals, and I get really excited. And I can tell that if I'm not careful, if I don't take time to wind down, to exercise that day, to like have some time to relax, that that will keep me up. I'll have a hard time falling asleep or I'll wake up in the middle of the night. And, this happens only occasionally. And I don't worry about it when it does because I sleep great most of the time. But I understand how this can happen. So that's one way that it can uniquely affect our sleep is actually being excited, which is a good thing. But when we're excited, our bodies release cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is going to make it really hard to sleep. So another thing that I see with a lot of my clients who are like this is that they are burning the candle at both ends, or they are working really hard. They are working and this might not be currently because from lack of sleep, they aren't able to do this anymore. But maybe in the past or in their 20s, they were working a lot. Like one of our clients, Richard, came to us after his sleep issue started when he was working 70 to 80 hours a week. And it got to the point where he was only sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night, and that was on medication. So, he had already taken a step back because he was forced to from not sleeping, but all that stress and overwork and busyness was what led to his body breaking down and it affecting his sleep. And so we can't expect to just go, go, go all day long and not have any time to decompress. Even, go, 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 and then watch TV for an hour. You're not leaving yourself any time to think and to, kind of let your mind process the day. And so then, it's still in this heightened state, which makes it really hard to fall asleep and sleep peacefully. So another thing that's unique about us as entrepreneurs and high achievers is that we know our purpose. So some people I'm working with actually they don't really have a purpose in life. They haven't figured that out. And that can actually lead to sleep issues too. But for us, we know our purpose. We know what we're going for. We, have a plan to get there. And and so so we have that, which is positive, right? But we can also be in a really big hurry to get there. Again, if you're like I am, I have kind of this restlessness where I'm always looking for the next thing. And I accomplish one thing, finish one thing. I don't always take the time to celebrate it. And I'm just on to the next thing. And I want to get bigger and bigger. And so it's been, my work to start slowing down and celebrating my accomplishments and resting after I've had a big push before moving on to the next thing. And I know, like, I'm working with a client, John, who he's not sleeping well, but sheer willpower to get through the day, but I do it. Like, I get stuff done, I'm motivated, but he said, "But I know if I were sleeping, it would be so much easier and I could get even more done." So, what can happen too when we are pushing and striving is that our nervous system can get stuck in fight or flight. And this makes it really hard to relax and unwind. And, this could be you if you feel like you have to be productive all the time, right? You don't even want to take time to get sick because then you can't get stuff done and your plans get derailed. So it's easy to get stuck in that fight or flight, in that stress response, which is going to make it really hard to sleep at night. Now, what also happens with this stress is that mental stress affects the body over time. And there's this concept called metabolic chaos that I've talked about in a previous episode, which I will link to in the show notes. But the principle of it is that stress starts affecting one system in the body. And once that system goes, and say for some of us, our first symptom is sleep issues. Other people might have digestive issues or skin issues or fatigue, or, there are lots of other ways that stress can affect us differently. But for some of us, it's our neurological function that goes first, which affects our sleep, our ability to concentrate. And so once one system starts getting out of whack, that starts affecting other systems in the body. And so then gut health is affected and liver function is affected and our hormones are affected. And so all of those imbalances then contribute to this metabolic chaos. And then that metabolic chaos keeps getting more systems of the body out of balance. So by the time you are having any kind of symptom, including not sleeping well, it means your body, multiple systems in your body are completely out of whack. And so, even though so many of the entrepreneurs and high achievers I work with care a lot about their health, just like I did, they want to eat well, they exercise, some of them are even into biohacking. Like, you know, they they want to be healthy because they know that that is part of being successful. That's going to help them. But their bodies have become out of balance by the time they aren't sleeping. And so some of the people I'm working with like this, their cortisol is actually still really high, which is what we think of when we think of as sleep issues, right? Is that cortisol is high at night. And it could be high all the time, which means that even though their body's under a lot of stress, it's actually good in a way because their body still has the resources to deal with that stress. But what happens over time, the longer we're stressed, the more things that get out of balance, kind of the older we are and the longer that we've been stressed, then cortisol can become depleted over time. So sometimes I'm working with people in their 40s, 50s, 60s who actually have really low cortisol. And that's because their bodies don't have the resources anymore to make enough cortisol to deal with all the stress that they've been under. And then low cortisol can also lead to sleep and all kinds of other issues as well. And I also tend to see poor gut health and in all of these clients, including myself. It's interesting that stress directly damages the lining of the gut. And once the lining of the gut gets damaged, then that leads to what is called leaky gut. Maybe you've heard of that concept. And that's when the actual cells of the gut wall become damaged and they let things leak through the gut wall into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there, like undigested food particles and toxins, which causes a lot of inflammation. And then when the gut wall is damaged, we don't absorb nutrients well from food, and we you're more likely to develop, to get a gut infection, such as with a parasite and bad bacterial overgrowth. Um, and this can also lead to food sensitivities, to where you start reacting to certain foods, all of which cause this inflammation, creates more stress in your body, and that inflammation leads the body to want to release more cortisol, because cortisol is an anti-inflammatory hormone. So another imbalance I commonly see in entrepreneurs and high achievers are lack of neurotransmitters. So especially serotonin, GABA, and dopamine. And again, that can happen when the gut isn't healthy. These neurotransmitters are actually made by the good bacteria in our gut. Up to 90% of them are. And nutrients become depleted over time. The nutrients our body needs to make neurotransmitters and hormones. And so I see a lot of these patterns in people who are striving and high achievers. So it's really this knowledge that even though this is mental stress, it leads to physical stress. It leads to all these imbalances in the body that are then affecting sleep. So I do want to talk about the importance of sleep for a few minutes, especially for entrepreneurs and high achievers. And I know if you're listening to this, it's probably because you aren't sleeping well. I'm assuming you know the importance of sleep. And I'm not talking to people who are choosing not to sleep at this point. Although if this is you, then this is very relevant as well. But this is to help motivate you of how important it is for you to be sleeping, so that you are motivated to figure this out so that you can get the sleep you need. Because I know that you have big goals, you have big dreams, you have things that you want to achieve, and it's probably to help other people. And so the reason I want to support people like us is because you're making a difference in the world. And I want you to be able to make that difference in the world. You're not going to be able to make the impact that you could, that your potential, if you aren't getting enough sleep. So it's super important to figure this out. So one of the main reasons why sleep is so important is for productivity. So research shows that after a sleepless night, people are 3 times more likely to lose concentration and twice as likely to make placekeeping errors, which means, they kind of forget where they were and have to go back to it. So imagine how much more time it's going to take you to do things when you're constantly losing concentration and losing, your place of what you were doing. It's going to take so much longer. It's actually been estimated that sleep deprivation costs American companies $63.2 billion a year in lost productivity. So this is also important if own a business with employees, that they are also getting sleep. Now, another really fascinating point about the importance of sleep is about making better decisions. And this was a fascinating study, I thought, is people who sleep 5 hours a night are more likely to make riskier decisions than those who sleep 8 hours a night. And this was a study that used gambling as a way to test this. So, twice a day for a week, participants were asked to choose between receiving a certain amount of money or gambling the money for a higher amount with the possibility of losing it all. Typical gambling situation, right? Now, at the beginning of the week, less sleep didn't influence the participants' decisions. But what's interesting is that as the sleep deprived nights added up, more and more of them took the bigger risk. They started making different decisions. And what's even more interesting is that they didn't see that there was any difference in their decision making as they got more and more sleep deprived. So they actually didn't perceive that they were taking bigger risks, even though they were. How crazy is that? So I think it's easy to think that sleep deprivation isn't affecting us, that we can still make good decisions, but studies are showing the opposite, and we don't even know that it's happening. Now, I thought this was interesting too. Bill Clinton was quoted as saying that every major mistake he had made in his life had happened as a result of sleep deprivation. Wow. Now, the third reason I want to point out why sleep is so important, especially for entrepreneurs and high achievers, is that we need to be able to look at problems and situations from a fresh perspective, right? In other words, we need to be creative and innovative to solve problems and to come up with these unique solutions in our business. And what's crazy is that stress, which is also the enemy of productivity, can actually shut down the creative parts of our brain. So when we're under stress, our inquisitiveness, our exploration, our creativity is totally shut down. And the reason why sleep is so important for creativity is because it's during deep sleep that our memories are made, that our brain kind of takes everything that we learn during the day and decides what it thinks is most important and starts storing those memories and experiences. And then it's during REM sleep that that information is kind of cataloged. So it's the brain puts it into different places to kind of organize it and make sense of it. And so this is when creative ideas can really happen. But we need to be getting enough sleep for that to happen, both deep sleep and REM sleep. And I've noticed this that sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and just have this great idea while I'm still lying in bed, still just kind of waking up. And I have to put it in my notes in my phone immediately, or else I totally forget about it. And sometimes this even happens in the middle of the night, especially when I'm in that excited mode and not sleeping as well. Those ideas will come to me. So it's also, sleep is also important for being able to learn new tasks, for having a strong immune system so we don't get sick as often, for staying motivated and positive. Studies show that we're much more positive when we've got enough sleep, and even for being a great leader. I mean, think about it, the traits of empathy, making good decisions, like I just talked about, communicating, thinking clearly, prioritizing. All of those are traits of a good leader. And the more sleep that we get, or when we get enough sleep, we're going to be able to have those strong leadership traits as well. So I just really want to point out how important it is to rest and even to play. And there are two books that I highly recommend. One is called Essentialism. This is by Greg McKeown, I think is how you say it. And he wrote, "The best asset we have for making a contribution to the world is ourselves. If we underinvest in ourselves, and by that I mean our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, we damage the very tool we need to make our highest contribution. One of the most common ways people, especially ambitious, successful people, damage this asset is through a lack of sleep." Wow. So I highly recommend this book. He also talks about the importance of play. And I, remember a couple years ago, it was a sunny, beautiful summer day. And in Jackson, where I live, summers are precious. They're 2 to 3 months long. And it's when the weather is perfect. It's usually in the 80s. It's blue skies. It's absolutely gorgeous, but very short. So while I'm inside working, a lot of times I'm looking outside, like all I want to do is go get on my mountain bike. And so I decided this day I had time to bike. You know, I felt a little guilty because it's going to take at least 2 hours to drive there and bike and get home. But what happened was I go on this bike ride. I'm so excited to be out there. And I had this great insight. And I wrote an entire blog post in my head that day. And yes, I stopped on my ride and I put in my notes, but it's just amazing how when we are playing or resting, those are when the good ideas come, not when we're grinding in front of our desk for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And another book I highly recommend that I just read and is really inspiring to me is called 10x is Easier Than 2x. It's by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And one quote from there is, "This is one fundamental reason why recovery is so essential. Your best and most innovative ideas will occur while you're unplugged from the busyness of work and able to really expand and contract your thinking, expanding the vision, coming up with new ideas, etc." And they also say it's counterintuitive, but in order to go 10x, you need to work less, not more. So, I hope that this helps motivate you. If you are an entrepreneur and a high achiever, you aren't sleeping well. I want you to know that by the time you aren't sleeping well, again, your body is out of balance, but we can find out what that is and fix it. So I know it's probably frustrating that you've probably done a lot of research if you're like I was, and you're following all the sleep hygiene. Maybe you've even done cognitive behavioral therapy. Like you're trying different supplements. You're doing all the right things. If that is true and you still aren't able to sleep well, then there's imbalances in your body that are keeping you awake. And in my programs at the Sleep Detective, I use functional lab testing to find out what those imbalances are. I'm looking at cortisol and hormones and gut health and liver function and nutrients and inflammation and neurotransmitters and so many things. I look at lots of different things so that we don't miss anything. And then we give you a plan to get your body back in balance so that you can sleep normally. So if everything you've tried so far hasn't worked, it doesn't mean that you just have to live with sleep deprivation forever. We can fix this, and it's going to improve your health. It's going to improve your sleep, which is also going to improve your productivity and creativity and help you be able to achieve what you actually want to achieve. So if this is something that you are interested in, feel free to check out my website, thesleepdetective.com. And if you want to book a consultation to talk about what's going to sleep and how the programs work, then you can do that at the link in the show notes. All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next week.